welcome to the Infinity Academy from the Dice Gods. My name is Hydra, and this is not a video I anticipated doing yet. The plan was to wait for N5 because we're a couple of months away from that, and that may well change list writing, but we're just about to locally have a escalation league, and some of my new players were asking about the theory of list writing, so I thought, you know what, we're just going to stick this together. So this video is going to be a little bit less polished than some of the other Academy videos. Apologies for that one. When we know what changes, if any, N5 makes to list writing, then this video will be redone for N5, as will the rest of the Academy. I can't wait for that one. Anyway, so today we're going to go through the absolute basics, guts of writing a list for Infinity N4. That will include some theory, and then we are going to do some an example as well of a list for a specific mission. There are going to be other videos coming out for members and Patreons where we take a specific list and we tear that apart. So you guys, if you actually want to get one of your lists critiqued or you want some input on it as well, we're going to start doing that. We're going to open the floor up to that one so that you guys can put in your lists and we can have a look at it and discuss how it can work and how it can improve and stuff like that. But for everybody else, today, it is the basics. It is the guts, the nuts, the bolts of writing a list for Infinity N4, because let's be honest, it's daunting. There are 30, 40 different factions and sub-factions inside of this game. Every particular trooper will have multiple profiles. You've got multiple missions. Where do you start? And that's the first thing to say about this. This is a way to start. This is not a this is the perfect way, this is the only way, this is the right way. So all of you new players, all of you existing players who have sat there, fingers on the keyboards, ready to say it's wrong, this one's for the newbies. This is to give them a place to start. What you will find is as you write more lists, you'll find your process and your preferred way of approaching writing lists. So this is not definitive. But veterans, watch this video and put your method down below. How do you write lists? How do you approach a specific mission or a specific tournament or whatever? Let us know below. This is not geared towards competitive. This is not geared towards non-competitive. This is geared towards, holy crap, how do I write a list? That's what we're here to do. So this is actually going to mirror the original Infinity Academy that I actually ran for a community in the UK about 8 years ago now in Bournemouth. So we're going to start with Death by PowerPoint, and then we're going to move to the actual Army app and run through a theory and stuff like that. So let's get into that PowerPoint. If you have any questions from this, stick them below as you go. Yeah, let's get into it. Let's do some list writing. Okay, now the first place to start with any list is with your mission. So we've discussed missions in, I think it was part 4 of our getting to the table and playing with Infinity. I'll link that at the top now. So if you need to know how the missions work, that information is there, but we're going to assume you know that to an extent. So the first thing to know is how you score, because that will inform the type of list that you need to write. Infinity missions scored out of 10, so understanding when and where you can score those objectives is crucial. So we're going to actually look at supplies today. It's probably one of the more basic missions. So main objectives: at the end of the game, control a supply box, 2 objective points for each supply box. At the end of the game, control more for 1. At the end of the game, adversary has no boxes, 1. So there are 3 supply boxes. So for control a supply box, you can get up to 6 points. 7, 8 for you have more and they have none. And then 2 classifiers as well, which are worth 1 point each, giving you the 9 and 10 points. So what that says is that out of a possible 10 points, 8 or 80% of them come from controlling supply boxes. So those are going to be your focus when you are doing this mission. Okay. How do you extract a supply box? You need a specialist troop to declare a skill to do it. So straight away, our list must contain specialists. That is crucial. So, what are specialists? Hackers, doctors, engineers, field observers, paramedics, chain of command, and specialist operative. Those are the guys that can do it. But some missions will have buffs for certain types of specialist. In the case of supplies, we have the specialist troops that apply here, which is the ones we've just been through, plus doctors and paramedics get a +3 bonus to extracting the supply box. So you're going to instantly give yourself a boost if you're taking doctors and paramedics to open those boxes. When they're open, troopers can carry them. They can pick them up and run with them. That's fine. A trooper can only carry one. So these are the things you need to know. You need to understand that your specialists need to pop them, but then anyone can pick up and run with them. This is cool. You don't need specialists to run with them. You can only carry one box at a time, unless you have the baggage special skill, and only models and not markers. So you can't do it with camo, you can't do it with impersonation, you can't do it with holo echo, only troopers themselves. So there's little point in giving a box to a camo trooper other than if they have mimetism. You're not going to sort of invalidate your opponent's ability to target that trooper. Controlling the supply box is at the end of the game, you are in base-to-base contact and not a null state with that box. So you need to have 3 troopers with 1 box each, controlling each supply box to achieve maximum points at the end of the game. Simple as that. And this is the setup. There are different setups based on the size of game that you're playing. We're going to be talking about 300 points today, so that's on the right-hand side. As you see, you've got the 3 purple dots down the midline. That's where the supply boxes will start. So that's what your troopers need to get to, your specialists need to get to pop them open, and then to start running them back and keeping control. So the first thing you need to do now that you've got the mission in your head and you know how to score is, as you are going to write your list, you need a plan of what you want your list to do. So in this case, what to do when. So when can you score and how? We know with supplies that all of the scoring, apart from your classifieds, happens at the end of the game. So that's the most important bit, to understand what and where those points happen, because some missions will score at the end of every round. You need to be clear in your head, I score at this point, therefore that's what I need to aim for. You then need to consider your style of combat, whether you're going to go for an alpha strike and just trying to blend your opponent off the board, whether you want to be sneaky and hide, whether you want to go into a sort of attrition combat situation, whether you want to go asymmetric, how you want to approach this game. Have that idea in your head. Certain armies will lend themselves to a certain style. So if you're a military orders player, for example, your limits, your options for being sneaky are incredibly small. Your options for doing an alpha strike and just blasting your opponent off the board, incredibly high. Likewise, trying to do a sort of in-their-face head-on strike with Shazvasti can be brief and violent and end up with a lot of dead Shazvasti. So understand what your army does to an extent and then apply that to the list that you write. Then you need to have a plan for what if you go first. If you get the first turn, what are you going to do? What does your first turn look like? We know we have 3 boxes on the midline. How many boxes of those ideally would we have at the end of the first turn? I would suggest having 3 is massively unlikely. It will also be defined by your table setup and your opponent and what they're running and what their list is. That's true. But if you can kind of be like, well, actually what I want to do is move up to the middle of the board and control it and get 1 box back and maybe a classified. That's what I want to do in my first turn if I go first. So my opponent is then walking into a hail of fire and mines and flamethrowers and all this kind of stuff. That's what I want to do in my first turn. Likewise, if you're going to go second, what do you want to do? Do you want to have ARO pieces, total reaction bots, covering those boxes on the midline? Do you want them covering all of them? Do you want to cover some of them? Are you okay, for example, with your opponent taking all 3 boxes? Because that's absolutely fine. My entire plan for this game is based on my opponent opening the boxes and then me killing them. This is legitimate too. So having that plan for going first and going second will give you an idea of the structure and form that your list needs to take. Okay, so we have the mission, we have an outline of a plan. Now we need to look at the list basics. First, points. How many points are you going to be spending on your list? A standard game of Infinity is currently 300 points, so we're going to be building to that. But you can go from 150 to 400. There are options there, but you'll know what points you're going to be getting. You also have SWC, or support weapons cost. For every 50 points of game, you get 1 SWC. SWC is used on your big guns, your hackers, your specialists, special stuff, and your sneaky stuff. If you need any required units, so every list must have, every list must have a lieutenant. That's it. There must always be a lieutenant in your list. But some other units come with requirements. If, for example, you are running, let's think, Kangxi for Yuqing, they have to have a Kangxi controller with them. You can't take them otherwise. You'll get an error on your list. It's necessary. That is it and all about it. Antipodes must have an antipode controller. Yeah, if you're taking, what are they called? Post-humans for Aleph, you have to take 2. Understanding those requirements is important when you're writing your list. Those requirements will be on the profiles. You'll see them. We'll look at some in a minute. But yeah, you need to be aware of that one. Then we have combat groups. A list contains combat groups which can only share orders within itself. So if you have 10 troopers in one combat group and then a second combat group with 3, that main primary combat group of 10 can only share its orders with itself. It can't give them to the second combat group, and the second combat group can't give orders back. That's the split. Each combat group can have a maximum of 10 troopers, and you need to be aware of that when you need to have that in your mind, because there is arguments for having a 10 order primary combat group and then whatever else goes in the secondary. I've seen people running 8 and 7, so 8 orders in one, 7 orders in another. 6 and 9, there are different ways of doing it, and there are reasons for doing different things. And last but not least, we come to the trooper limit, where the rules state we can only take 15 troopers. Note that that's not minis, so if you have units which have remotes attached to them, then those won't count towards your trooper limit. And that does mean that if you max out your number of troopers, you max out 15 troopers, then you're going to end up with 2 combat groups, one of 10 and one of 5, or split differently, as we discussed a minute ago. The post-humans, again, are another example where you can end up with multiple miniatures, but only 1 trooper. So just be conscious that you can have 15 troopers, but there can be more miniatures. Them's the rules. Here we are. Next, list structure. What a fantastic graphic. Are you loving that? I'm loving that. Let's dive into a general concept of how you can structure your list. Again, I'll reiterate, this is not definitive. This is not the only way. This is not the air quotes right way. This is a good way that I found new players can get their head around writing lists. So let's dive into that. First, at the middle, you have your core. These are your mission scorers, the required units, things like that. So what do we mean by that? We have the lieutenant, because he's a required unit. They are a required unit. There are 3 different types of lieutenant: sneaky, baseball bat, and victim. Now, sneaky is something like a camo marker, something that can has a hollow mask, so it can hide its identity. Something that is sneaky and hard to tell that it's your lieutenant. A baseball bat is effectively, as the name implies, a lieutenant that you hit the enemy with repeatedly. For sneaky, we're looking at, as I say, camo type lieutenants, that kind of thing. A baseball bat, you're looking at your tag. The ultimate baseball bat lieutenants would be the Marut for Aleph, or the Avatar for Combined Army. They exist to batter the snot out of your opponent, do massive amounts of violence. Yeah, that's it. That's their whole shtick. The third one is the victim. This is normally a cheap, squishy little munchkin of unit that will spend its entire game carrying behind a box on top of a very high building, praying that no one shoots it. That is it. It is there for the whip roll. It is there for the lieutenant order. That is its purpose, and not dying. That is the job of your victim lieutenant. Classic examples of these are things like moderators for Bakunin, your fusiliers. Please don't kill me. I'm really nice. I really am. That's what you're looking at there with your victim lieutenants. So they will be cheap. You have them because you need them. Next, we have within the core your lieutenant support. So if you are taking a baseball bat lieutenant, a chain of command trooper is a must, because otherwise your lieutenant is too vulnerable. When you see a Marut that is clearly a lieutenant because it's throwing out strategos, and all these kind of things, then it's got a huge, great target on it. It's going to die. You need somebody there with the chain of command skills so that when your lieutenant dies, you don't end up in loss of lieutenant. So that's crucial. Next, we have two different things. We have the specialists. So if you need specialists for missions or classifieds, this is the core, is where you put enough and the right types in there. So what do I mean by enough? What do I mean by the right types? In reverse order, right types. With supplies, we know that we get a buff for paramedics and doctors. So you're going to want to prioritize getting doctors and paramedics into your list. They need to be in there. Okay. You then need, because this mission has classified objectives, and classified objectives can pull in other different types of specialists to do them. So some of them can only be done by an engineer. Some of them can only be done by guys with decharges. Some can only be done by hackers. Because of that, you want a mix of different specialists in here. I would say if you come to a game that requires and is central for specialists like supplies, and you have 3, your opponent will prioritize and kill those, and they won't be there anymore. That's too few. You need to balance the core, getting enough units in that it's not worth trying to kill your specialists. So I think 4, 5, 6 is okay, depending on your faction. That it's not worth your opponent expressly targeting your specialists. A little while back, a good friend of mine and I played last launch. I'd written a list that was tailored to the mission. He'd not had time, unfortunately, so I think he turned up with 1 specialist that could do the job. In that mission, you need to go to a console, get a ticket, give that ticket to each member of your army, and then they need to go to a central console and get evacuated. So you have to have that specialist to give everyone the golden ticket. I think he had 1, and I think I killed it in the first turn, at which point the game was pretty much done, because he can't get anyone else. He doesn't have specialists. So 4, 5, 6 is kind of the territory, I'd say, for most specialists you want to be, and probably a spread of them, but with being mindful of any ones that get bonuses. Mission critical units is if you're not doing a specialist type game. So if you're scoring with army points, then units like baggage, which add extra points to the area they're in. So with army points games, you'll have like a quadrant that you need to control it by having more army points in it. So points from your list. A baggage unit adds bonus points to the quadrant that it sits in. So you can end up with more than 300 points on the table effectively in baggage. So mission critical units like that, they are another thing that you would take in the core. Like, actually, I really need to skew this particular game type in my favour. That can be, in games where you're doing a lot of violence, your big heavy hitters, your shooty stuff. If the game is about assassinating the specialists on the other side, or killing more army points, or that kind of thing, this can be your big daiquiri stuff. But that's your core. Lieutenant support, your specialists if you need them, your heavy hitters or point controllers if you don't. Next up, we have support. This is where we get the units which are going to enable your mission scorers, your specialists, to do their thing effectively. Here we have the big guns, so these are for killing. Now, there is a school of thought that in Infinity, those are the most important because you kill everything on the other side and then you do your mission. There is a valid thought process, but we're going to ignore that for the time being. These are your support weapons. They are going to chew up your SWC. You want high burst, good range gunfighters in there. So heavy machine guns, hyper rapid magnetic cannons, Spitfires, and the variants of all of those. So for example, a Red Fury and a Mark 12 are, because of their range bands, variants of Spitfires. The Mark 12 actually is not necessarily in this list because it's only burst 3. A heavy machine gun is burst 4. Hyper rapid magnetic cannon, burst 4. Spitfire, burst 4. You need to have some of those in here because sometimes, all the time, anything dies if you throw enough dice at it. So you need to make sure that you are putting out a sufficient volume of dice to bring stuff down. If you come up against a very heavily armoured tag and your weapons with armour cracking ability aren't in the territory, you need to make it make lots of saves. That's what you need it to do. So high burst offsets bad dice. Make sure you have some of those in here. Big guns also include your sniper rifles. It includes your missile launchers and stuff like that, but those are low burst. So you want those. They can serve a purpose, but I would, as a rule, especially for newer players, prioritise getting 2, maybe 3 high burst weapons into your list, especially at 300 points if you can. Then we come up to hackers. Hacking can be as potent as shooting and more flexible as well. Having some around is good. They let you lock up heavy infantry. They let you spotlight things that have got negative modifiers to hit. So you get a camo unit with mimetism. It's got mimetism -3. You spotlight it with a hacker. That mimetism -3 goes away. They let you take control of enemy tags. So if they have got that really heavily armoured tag coming at you and you can't seem to kill it, just steal it. Just steal it. It's all good. Certain hackers have other abilities as well, which can change the ebb and flow of the game. So yeah, hackers are always worth having around the place, and they're useful especially with missions. They are very useful with classifieds because they can do so many different ones, so many different classifieds. Next up we have the camo airborne trooper impersonation, the surprise stuff. These are very good at controlling the ebb and flow of the game, controlling what your opponent does, giving them bad choices. You can use them for a counterpunch. So if you get an opponent who alpha strikes you and comes charging across the board, what they don't want is an airborne deployed trooper walking in behind them with a Spitfire, because they're all looking the wrong way and you're going to get them out of cover. So they're also good for nuking a target. So impersonation, which you'll get in Shazvasti, you've got them. So Combined Army, Hack Islam. There's a few impersonation units in the game. They can deploy into the enemy's deployment zone. And if you have a very clear, obvious victim lieutenant, you put the impersonation trooper as your last unit down, by that dude, and yeah, you can just nuke their lieutenant turn 1. Always fun, always amusing. Everybody finds it entertaining. Honest, it won't lose your friends. You won't stop getting invites, I promise. Probably. You can also include actually things like units in JSA that have the hidden deployment and infiltration plus. So you can then put a ninja, incredible close combat output ninja on the deployment line of your opponent that they don't know is there until they walk past it and it slices them in half. These kind of units are really, really useful for that too. They go into that group. Then we have board control, and that is, especially with things like supplies, you know what the enemy has to go for. You know where they need to go. So knowing that they need to go somewhere, you can make it hard for them to go there. That is your mines, mad traps, and crazy koalas. So mines speak for themselves. Mad traps are things that charge at you and glue you to the floor, and crazy koalas are things that charge you and blow your face off. These are great things to have around those boxes on the midline. Template units. If you've got a close-in area of the board, having a guy with a heavy flamethrower in cover stood there is a real big nope for a lot of people. They can't, how am I going to deal with the template? If I pop around the corner, he's going to flame me. I'm going to have to shoot him, or I'm going to have to dodge. If I dodge, he's still there. Oh, yeah. You end up in a difficult situation. Guard units. This is a 8-inch close combat bubble, effectively. So that is unpleasant if it's near, again, one of these boxes. If you're going to get close to it and suddenly a big robot wolf is going to come charging across the board and eat your face, this is not good. And then the classic total reaction bot. 360-degree visor with a heavy machine gun that fires its full burst in ARO. These will control a fire lane, a position, etc, etc. Some people would put snipers in there. I personally wouldn't. It's one shot, even if it's coming from camo. It's not, in my opinion, the best use of points, but it's the least forgiving use of points. You can also put, actually, while I think about it, neurocynetics in there, which is the ability to fire full burst in ARO and only burst one in active phase. There are certain units that have that as well, so they're like total reaction bots. But yeah, things that just make it hard for your opponent to do a thing. Hackers can also be board control. If you've got an opponent who is very heavily hackable, because they have a lot of heavy infantry or a lot of remotes, hackers can become that type of board control. You can make these no-go areas where people just can't mess with it. So that is your support part of the list. Next, we have auxiliary, which is everything else. That is your cheerleaders, the cheap, cheerful guys who, for the most part, hide behind everything at the back of the field, or fill out a fire team or something like that. They're there to generate orders to get other people to do stuff. We then have our force multipliers, which go in there. Evo hackers, which can, for example, we talked about having a total reaction bot, giving ARO coverage to a box. Take the Evo hacker, he has a program that then gives that total reaction bot the ability to ignore the negative cover modifier when shooting. So the idea of, okay, it's not a problem, I can shoot from cover and take it out. Well, actually, he ignores cover, so crack on. Evo hackers can also buff when airborne deployed troops come in. So if you're going to do that counter-hack, counter-punch, they improve the efficiency there. They can put buffs on heavy infantry and remotes to stop them being easily hacked. So Evo hackers generate an order, 15, 20 points, 0.5 SWC, but they let you put a magic spell on your dudes just to make them that little bit better. They buff things up. Equally, rem drivers. There's a few of these in the game. Two that spring to mind off the top of my head. The Apsara for LF, and then the lady what's-a-chops person face for Pano. That's a really good story, isn't it? I really enjoyed that one. Yeah, there is a character inside of Pano as well who also does the rem driver. And what a rem driver does, what a rem driver is it puts a buff on certain aspects of the stats of a remote. And her name is Agnes Ferreira for Pano. So Agnes Ferreira does this too. So with Agnes, you can put a buff on to a remote, a specific one, and that remote gets +1 to its BS and +5 to its close combat. For Aleph, specifically OSS, the Apsara changes the remotes to having CC 15 and BS 13 with whip 14. That's really handy if you're running OSS for Aleph, that's sectorial. They have Dakinis, which natively are BS 11, which is a bit rubbish, but you can put them in a fire team. So that's great. So you have your Dakini HMG, who's BS 11. He's got good range. He's got his buffs from his fire team. And, you know, potentially get a target out of cover. He's going to get +3 for range, +3 for being in a 5 robot fire team. He's going to be hitting on 17s. You put that Apsara in the mix. The BS goes from 11 to 13, and suddenly he's hitting on 19s. You can multiply the effectiveness and output of that fire team by putting the rem driver into the list. Again, these are 20 odd points, but they put that buff for where you need it. Servant bots. These are little remotes that can be attached to a doctor or an engineer and will do the doctor engineer trick at across the board range from your doctor or engineer, and they move faster and they often have mimetism where doctors frequently don't. These let your doctors or engineers be in 2 places at once. They let your doctors and engineers take that Hail Mary run across the board for less orders because they move quicker without dying. These tend to be about 3 points. So if the servant bot gets fragged, it's annoying, but I'm fine. I haven't lost any orders because they don't generate orders. I haven't lost my doctor. I haven't lost my engineer. Servant bots multiply the abilities of your engineers and your doctors. Then we have repeaters, pitchers, deployable repeaters, and fast pandas. These build the hacking network. If you're an army that is heavily into hacking, like nomads, then having a strong network of repeaters that gives you coverage across the board is really potent, is really strong. It's well worth having around the place, and it just means that, again, your hacker can be in more than one place, because it's when you have a repeater, the zone of control, the ancients around that, can be hacked through by any of your friendly hackers. So in ARO, if a remote walks into a zone of control of a repeater and you have 4 hackers, all 4 hackers can hack that remote in one go wallop. It's just so much fun. So yeah, those bits of equipment are force multipliers, and the units that carry them can then improve things for you. Then you have the option in this auxiliary part of your list to put in your counters. These are the things that, you know, if you know your meta, if you know what your friends like to run, or this kind of thing, it might be worth bringing too. So if you don't have them, we're talking killer hackers. So if you're facing a hacker-heavy army, it might be worth having a killer hacker in, just to give them a bit more pause and stop their efficiency. If you know you're facing an opponent who likes taking multispectral visor because you have camo, then a unit with albedo can't be targeted in the first turn by somebody with MSV. They can't see them. So that's really potent. Or a hacking device plus, because that can do, I think it's mirror ball, which creates an area where a smoke ring, basically, where everyone else can see through, apart from MSV. If you've got the points, it's worth sticking them in. So yeah, so that is the general list structure that you can use for your army. But what does that actually look like? How does that work? Let's go from this theory to the practice of putting together a list. So, time to put a list together. We're going to do 300 points, we're going to do supplies. I'm going to use Yuqing because there's some great examples that I can give you of different ideas in here. It's also important to make sure you label your list. And if you can see up here, we've given it a name, so that when I save it, I can easily tell which one, which particular list this was. So we're going to do 300 points. This is all set up. I've changed the order of my units so that they're ordered by name, because I find that easier. If you want to order it by the type of troop or whatever, you can do that too, but I personally just find having it in alphabetical order works best for me. Right, so the first thing we need to do is talk about a plan. My overall plan with Yuqing, because Yuqing have quite a lot of heavy infantry, they have some sneaky sneakies, and they have some pretty good airborne deployment as well, is going to be this. If I go first, what I want to do is move rapidly up the board, grab 1 box, maybe 2 if the enemy gives me the opportunity to do that, and then pull back into a base of fire that is very hard to get through. If I go second, I want to have units that are up the board and doing board control. So I want to see my mines out there, I want to see that kind of thing. And if I go second, I also want to have an airborne deployed trooper that I can bring in if necessary, if my opponent alpha strikes and pushes me back, who could just come in and grab a box and extract that in my turn as well, for the psychological impact that can have and for the funsies that does. So that's the broad outline of a plan. 1, maybe 2 boxes in the first turn. I'm not going to necessarily worry too much about my classifieds in that first turn, and just aim to put the pressure on by controlling more of the boxes, and then using my heavy infantry, using my sneaky to hurt the enemy if they get too close to me. But let's start putting that together. We're going to start with our compulsory. So I'm going to use these to filter for lieutenants. And here we have the examples of the different types. Let's start with a definitive sneaky, Dao Ying. So this has a lieutenant profile. Because I've selected lieutenant from the drop down up here, these profiles all have the ability to run a lieutenant. The great thing about the Dao Ying is it's camouflaged, mimetism -3, and it gets +1 lieutenant order. So this actually generates 2 lieutenant orders and a normal order into your order pool of the combat group that it's in. For 22 points for a boarding shotgun, that's not bad. That's not bad. It's a really sneaky, especially if you have more than one camo marker on your back line. It's just a great way to go. If we then talk about beat sticks, we talk about the baseball bat. Here's a Moang lieutenant. It is a 40-odd point 2 wound plus no wound incapacitation, so effective 3 wound, 5 armor, BS 13 with Spitfire, Red Fury or Multi Rifle, and these Fleming Spear or Arc-Light Cannons. It's a hoofing beat stick. It does the violence. In the same vein, Guija Tag, 82 points of Dakar. Why would you run it as your lieutenant? Comedy value, and it's incredibly hard to kill. If you're doing a mission where you need to kill the lieutenant, I think decapitation, I think that's something like that. Anyway, where you need to kill more lieutenants, having a tag, it can go one of 2 ways. It's either absolute genius or the worst possible concept you've ever come up with. But again, these baseball bats will need a chain of command dude with them to make sure that you don't just end up in loss of lieutenant permanently. Next up, we have the very definition of the ultimate squishy victim lieutenant in the Zanshi. He's whip 13, he's 1 armor, he's 1 wound, he's 11 points, and he is a lieutenant. He is the ultimate ticked box, hide behind a box, don't die, please dear God, don't hurt me, not the face, not the face, ow. He's going in my list. For 11 points, that particular box is ticked. Now I'm going to hit this little reset filters at the top so I get everything back. And while we're talking about compulsory options, because I mentioned that while we were talking about the lists earlier, here's Kangxi. So the Kangxi are prisoners who are sent to the front lines with explosives around their neck. They have to have a Celestial Guard monitor or controller with them to be allowed in the list. So we have the Kangxi at the top here, and we have the guard at the bottom, the monitor at the bottom. If I just put in 2 Kangxi, you'll see that I have an X here now. And if I open this, it says that the Kangxi must be in the same group as its controller. So there is no controller or monitor. Those are the same things in this list, so it's not valid. If I put the monitor in, we go through a tick and everything is okay. This little box will help you avoid making those, oh, I had to take one of those mistakes. But we don't want Kangxi for the time being. There's nothing else specific compulsory that I want to take. So let's move into more of the core. Let's move into getting our doctors and our paramedics, because we know that they get +3 to opening the boxes. So doctors, there is one. There is one in Yuqing, because Yuqing is okay with paramedics, but doctors, yeah, it's kind of a hack thing. We don't really do that. So do I want this guy? 15 points, whip 13 doctor. He's okay. He's not awful, but I think there's probably better ways I can spend my points. Let's get rid of doctor and look at paramedics instead. Now we have more options. The interesting ones to me are Tiger Soldiers. That is a whip 14 combat jump airborne deployed guy, so we talked about wanting one of those. So I'm going to take him. He's going to go into the list straight away. If I go first, he can walk onto the board right next to a box, walk up to it, take it and run away. Fab. If I go second, he's a counterpunch, he's a flamethrower they won't expect. He's potentially, as I said, deploying at an inconvenient point to grab a box and run away with it. So for 31 points, he's a lot of points, but he is going to appear at an inconvenient moment. He has got mimetism -3. He has got the arm 2 and he has got whip 14. So he's a good investment in my book. We then have Shang-Chi, who are heavy infantry, 6-2 movement, 2 wounds, 4 arm. Zhu Yong, who are the same but arm 3 and lose some of the abilities. These both have paramedic ability, paramedic profiles. The Zanshi, who's another whip 13, cheap as chips. The Sol Yong is whip 13, MSV, yeah. This one, on paper, this is a paramedic for 23 points, it's whip 13. It's cheaper than the 2 heavy infantry, which is good. It's cheaper than the Tiger Soldier, but it's more expensive than the Zanshi. It's got the multi-spectral visor. NCO lets it spend a lieutenant order like it's a regular order, so potentially this is a good thing. But he's only got a submachine gun, so he's incredibly short range. You know, they're 8 inches is their good range band. So actually, that multi-spectral visor is not going to be much use on him. The NCO could be useful if I was taking the Dao Ying, who gave me the extra lieutenant order, but I don't think... I think we've got better ways of spending our points here. What I'm actually going to do is drop in a Shang-Chi paramedic, because that arm 4 and 2 wounds, the plus 2 inches to dodge, immune to shock, it makes these guys pretty tough and durable. He's going to take some dislodging, he's going to take some killing. So I'm going to take the Tiger Soldier and the Shang-Chi as my first specialists. I'm then going to move away from those, basically, from paramedics. Let's start looking around at hackers. We have a lot more hackers. We have a lot of options when it comes to hackers. Now, the Guilang are a lot of fun because they infiltrate to the midline, which is good. They have camouflage and they have mimetism -3. So he goes down as a marker on the midline at the start of the game and he's a specialist. So he's going to be right there at the start of the game to steal a box. Or he's a camo marker that your opponent needs to deal with if you go second. So he's going in. Now we're up to 3 specialists. We've got paramedic, hacker. Fab. And he's whip 14 as well, which is incredibly potent. What else should we put in there? Let's have a look. Ninjas. See, I like ninjas because we have hidden deployments. They don't know he's there. We have infiltration, so he's up the field. But again, we've got submachine gun tactical bow. And he's 20, 30 points. Yeah, it's a lot of points to sink into that. I think I'm not for the time being. I think I'm not going to go. I'm going to stick with that one hacker for the time being. I think there will be more later, but I'm going to stick with that for now. Now we're going to go to engineers. We have cheap option for engineers here. Whip 13 engineer. That's fine. Monstruckers. He's an engineer. He's incredibly cheap, but he's irregular. So he doesn't give a regular order to your team. So he's not necessarily that great within the context of the whole list. He's a cool unit. Don't get me wrong. I know they're great, but they're not that great. So I don't think so. I don't think so now. However, Chung Hee Yong. Right. He's an engineer. He's got +1 damage to his attack. He's got a built-in repeater. He's whip 14. And he's either got a K1 rifle, which ignores the armor of anything you shoot with it, or he's got a combi rifle and a rocket launcher. He's a character, which means that he can do certain missions because they get veteran at the moment in the current version of ITS. So with your classifieds, he can do an engineering one. He can do anything with decharges, and he can potentially do anything with veteran, which is certain ones as well. Plus he's a repeater, so he extends the hacking network for the Guilang if needed. So do you know what? I'm going to stick him in with that K1 because he's core, because he's a specialist, but he's also got that K1 which can actually do some killing stuff. You can do some killing. You've got the mines. Yeah, I'm going to keep him in the list. So we've now up to 5. We've got 4 specialists in there, a hacker, an engineer, and 2 paramedics. We don't at the moment have a forward observer, and I'm not too worried about that. The job of forward observer when it comes to the classified deck can mostly be done by a hacker, because you can either forward observe it or spotlight it. So you get more utility and better use of your points by taking a hacker than you do a forward observer. The thing that a forward observer's got, which a hacker doesn't, is flash pulse, which is something that can blind your opponent. But yeah, but no. I'd rather, I mean, if we look here, like of this Celestial Guard, a forward observer with boarding shotgun and flash pulse is 14. For 18 and half an SWC, I get a hacker with a combi rifle. So longer range weapon. I can still do the classified missions which require the forward observer or spotlight skill, but I can also then hack loads of other things. It's a better option. It's just a better option to take that. But we're not going to do that for the time being. We're not going to add in anything more. I think I'm going to go with these 4. So we've got quite a lot of utility there. I've got quite a lot of options there. What I want to start doing now is building out the support for them. And we're going to do that by actually adding in another Guilang, because I can have 2. My AVA is 2, so I can have another one. And I'm going to put a mine layer one of those up. So he's going to go up the board onto the midline, and he's going to put down his camo marker, and then he's put down another camo marker, which is a mine. So we now have 3 camo markers on the midline at the start of the game. Isn't this fun? I mean, not for the opponent. Definitely is for me, but not for the opponent. Okay. Let's just reset this. So 3 camo markers on the midline, 4 specialists, and a cheap lieutenant. What else can we put in there? We want to get some shooty goodness. We want to get some Dakar in there. Let's put in, how crazy do we want to go? I'm going to put in a Mowang because I rate them. I think they're a fantastic unit. With the Spitfire and Flaming Spear, personal favourite. He can also, because he's got this NCO skill, he can spend the Lieutenant's Order on himself. This is great. We're up to 213 points and 2.5 SWC, so we're getting there. We're moving forward. What else should we add in there? Because I hate having friends. A Yan Ho with hyper rapid magnetic cannon. So this is a very long range. Yeah, a very long range gun. Burst 4 or is it burst 5? I can never remember. Guns. List. So it's burst 5, either armor piercing or shot, can damage 15 with 16 to 32 inch good range. It's just not friendly. It's going to crack most things open and ruin their day. So we've got 2 weapons here now that are relatively high burst. We've got the K1 that can also deal with some armor. This is great. We're up to 8 orders. We're getting there. We're moving forward. We've got a degree of board control. We've got some shooty stuff. We've got our specialists in there. Okay, this is good. This is all fine. I think, let's see whether we can get a cheap heavy machine gun of some description in here. Because we've got a Spitfire. It would be good to have an HMG. Just to put down some fire. There we go. So, what I've just put in there is a 360-degree visor, total reaction heavy machine gun. Daka daka daka, basically. This little guy is going to do some work, covering a fire lane, making a mess of the enemies, all that kind of stuff. That's good fun. That's good fun. That can cover a box. Last but not least, I'm going to put some flavory type stuff in there. We're going to put some templates, some cheap templates in here. So we're up to 9 orders in our primary group. We can have 4 monks. Yeah, do I want to do that? $15 points. Let's have a look. We've got 1 SWC and 15 points left. Get another engineer, that might be better. We could get the hacker. We could get the Evo hacker as an auxiliary unit, which could then buff the... So what that can do is that can buff the total reaction bot to give it a the ability to ignore cover. And then it can also take that program off of the heavy machine gun if the heavy machine gun dies, and put the ability to make heavy infantry hard attack by putting a fairy dust program on heavy infantry. So then all of the heavy infantry is suddenly minuses to hacking rolls and get positives to their save. So -3 to be hacked and +3 to their BTS armor save. If we do that, we've got 10 orders. We've got, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting list. It's a little bit muddled and befuddled, but I think we've got the core of something here. I think this would be interesting to run. It's only 10 orders, so you almost want to go second. This list would ideally go second almost, actually, especially with the 2 Guilang on the midline. Yeah, I think that would be an interesting one to run. It can complete the mission. It has got some violence inside of it. It's got some sneaky tricks inside of it. It's not a straight list to play, and I think it will be interesting to see how that runs. But yeah, you can hear the Yu-Ching players that are screaming that I didn't take the monks, should have taken the monks, where's Liang Kai, you've got to take Liang Kai. I know, guys, but the idea is the theory this puts together, this will answer the question of how do I run a game of supplies with Yu-Ching. This would do the job. This would do some work, actually, and be quite durable and have answers for most things. I'd be interested to see how that did. I do not need Yu-Ching as an army. I have the Invincible Army. Stop it. Right. But I would take this list, I'd play with it, and then I'd iterate on it and change and move things around. There are different things you could run here. There are different ways you could approach this. But this is one route. This is one route, and you can try it and see what it does. Yeah. So that is the gist of list writing for Infinity. There are as many opinions and approaches as there are days in the week, if not days in the year. However, this approach will get you started. It'll get you trying things, and it'll get you having cohesive lists that work. If you want, well, as I said, I'm going to put together lists that I've run and lists that I do run. They're going to go into videos with analysis of the plan behind them, and then post-match how they did for members and Patreons. So that's going to be coming up in, well, for the foreseeable, to be honest with you. We're going to be running with that. Aside from that, let me know what questions you have regarding list building, or things you're not sure about, or things you're still confused about, or things that didn't make sense to you. Put those in the comments below. As I say, if you are a veteran player and you do have your own golden recipe for making lists, whack that in the comments too. Let us know what that one is. Thank you to the gorgeous Patreons and channel members for continuing to support the Dice Gods. You guys rock. And for those of you that don't, please consider doing it. It's going to unlock a whole load of new stuff, including actually a pre-tournament video that was from earlier in the year, where I talk about putting together a list for Invincible Army and my plan behind that and how that was supposed to run. Did it work that way? No, because my dice left me. Spoilers. They hated me. It was a real problem. But anyway. So yes, if you do want to see more stuff like this and more detailed stuff on lists, and less off the sort of firing from the hip, considered list writing, because this needs testing, iterating, etc., etc. That's, in my opinion, the best way to do a list, is to put one together, play it, and then try again. If you want to see more polished stuff, subscribe, become a member, become a Patreon. There'll be more stuff there in the coming months. Aside from that, please subscribe, like, and share, leave us a comment, and thank you for watching, and we will see you again soon.